Oh, today we have, I started thinking about chapter 14 of Matthew, and I started thinking about, gosh, what kind of story might I be able to find or remember or come up with or some pastoral story to throw in as illustration. And the more I looked at it, the more I went, this story today, the three stories, they're three great stories. There's a moment where you stop and you go, there's nothing I could find any better than these stories in terms of the Bible. I mean, when we talk about studying Scripture, these three stories today are fabulous. This is Jesus on display. He shows out and shows up. It's amazing. And in the three stories, we start out with a very difficult story, because what has just happened is Jesus has gone back to his hometown in chapter 13, and he had basically seen people that he knew growing up. They remembered him. Isn't this Mary's little boy? Isn't this Joseph's little fella? Has that ever happened to you, where you go and see family members and they remember you when you were this big? Yeah. I did have something happen like that one time. I was in, I changed schools in the 11th grade, and I went to the 11th grade. And anybody remember that crazy class called typing? Now, yeah, keyboarding now, right? Keyboarding. Yeah. I don't even know if they call it that anymore. You learn when you're 6 years old anymore how to, But back in those days, we had to learn to type on a typewriter that we had. What was that stuff they used to, all the other kids would sniff and smell, the whiteout and stuff like that. It's just weird. And so I get transferred from one school to another, and so I come to this new school, and I'm 11th grade, and I go in there in Miss Skipper's class. Her name was Miss Skipper. And I will say this is where my family originated from, and even though I did not know Miss Skipper, I walked up to her and handed her my card back in those days and said, "Hi, I'm your new student." And she looked at it and she said, "Oh, is your dad named Bill and your mom Aline?" And I went, "Yes." And in front of a whole class of people I have not known more than about 2 seconds, she says, "I know you. I changed your diaper." And I went, "Thank you. Everybody in the class now knows what." Anyway, that was that moment you just want to melt into the floor. And so when they tell Jesus, "Hey, aren't you that guy that we used to know?" I mean, yeah, that's the guy that you used to. Yes, you knew him when he was little. You knew him when he, ran around in the yard and stuff. And now he's doing miracles, and they're like, "Hi, you don't have any. We know who you are. You don't have any real power." And of course, at that point, he didn't. Now, the question was, did he have power? And the answer is yes. Did he want to show it? And he said no, because of faith. And so as we leave that moment, we sort of, transition. And that's one thing the Bible does, that modern dramas, that, we go from point A to point B suddenly, and it's a quick. So we go from there, and then suddenly we're with John the Baptist. And it says, at the time Herod, this is chapter 14, verse 1. At the time Herod the Tetrarch heard the reports about Jesus, and he said to his attendants, "This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work in him." What? He's dead? Wait a minute, he isn't dead. Or how's it? The story is funny because it not only goes from point A to point B, but it actually is it's going to, the very next sentence, we're going to transition and hear how he died. You're getting a little bit of a flashback here in the Bible. It says, "Now Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, 'It is not lawful for you to have her.'" In other words, you can't just marry anybody. You can't just take your brother's wife. Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of the people because they had considered John a prophet. On Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for the guest and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. An oath. Your word. My mother used to say, now when you give somebody your word, stand by it. You know, some people will say, that's all I've got is my word. You have my word. But what if your word is stupid? What if you made a promise about something that's totally idiotic? And it's one of those moments where you're thinking, okay, Herod, were you drinking at the time? Is this legal? Is it something that you should not have made? And the answer is absolutely. He promised her whatever she wanted. Prompted by her mother, she said, give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist. What? You want what? The king was distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guest, in other words, embarrassment, didn't want to be embarrassed, now here's the issue. If you're a dinner guest and somebody asks now here's the thing. I don't want a platter at my dinner table brought in that has a head of somebody. I mean, I got to laugh and tell you, I'm a little old, but some of the folks, we all love good barbecue, don't we? Yeah. Well, I remember opening the refrigerator one time. My grandmother had bought the head of a pig. And I'm going, I don't want to eat that. Needless to say, a few days later, we had some mush. Anybody know what that is? Yeah, exactly. Now I look back and go, if I'd have only known what that was. And I'm like, that's just crazy. But suddenly, John the Baptist is going to lose his head because some knucklehead said, hey, I'll give you whatever you want. And that's what's about to happen. Give me the head of John the Baptist. The king was distressed because of his oaths. He ordered that her request be granted and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought in on a platter and given to the girl. Who did what? She didn't scream in horror. She carried it to her mother. That's just crazy. What a story. That's a crazy story. That's a crazy story. John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. And I'm thinking, did you have a headless body? Where's his head? I don't know. Then they went and told Jesus. My first thought is, what would Jesus say to that? If I keep going and doing what I'm doing, eventually I might lose my head. And yet, he keeps on. Faith over fear. Faith over fear. How many times does Jesus say, have no fear? Anybody know that answer? 365 times. One for every day. Have no fear. Do not fear. That is faith over fear. You cannot be, when it comes to Jesus, when it comes to your faith, when it comes to God, do not fear. And when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. He was so upset that he needed time to himself. He needed prayer. He needed solace. He needed peace. He needed time alone. How do we respond to stressful situations? It's a great life lesson. How do you respond when times are chaotic, when times are stressful, when traffic's terrible, when the job's not working out, when things seem, crazy in my family? How do we respond? And the answer is, so often we complain, fuss, talk, what? Clam up, don't say. Do you pray? Be prayerful in all things, especially when it's stressful, when it's difficult, when times are hard. Even Jesus shows us this. And that's a great life lesson. Prayer. It says pray without ceasing. I don't know about you, but I pray. I try to pray regularly, but also I'm sometimes riding down the road, and I've said this numerous times. You don't have to, I know we bow our heads when we have prayer in church so often, but look, if you need to be praying while you're driving down the highway, don't close your eyes. That's right. Don't close your eyes. Don't go off in some trance, but, lift up. And here's the thing I found. When you have time and you're actually thinking about prayer and you turn the radio off and you're not on your phone, no hands, right? Nobody's gotten a ticket yet. So, but off your phone, turn your radio off, everything. And even if you're driving, if you just drive, God will put a name in your head. The Holy Spirit will speak to you. You will hear a name. You will think of somebody. Pray for that person. Maybe even call them after you get to a spot where you can. But God does that. That's part of praying without ceasing, is knowing that there are people that need prayer every day, all day, not just you. Prayer is not a self-centered, narcissistic thing. Prayer is about praying for other people. Because here's the thing. If you pray for people that are in need, they're going to pray for you. Hopefully. That's what community, that's what church is about, praying for those who are with us in the middle of all this together, praying, leaning on one another. You need, I need, we all need each other. That is another important issue. But he withdrew to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had what? Compassion. He's not angry. He's not mad. He's not saying, why can't you people leave me alone? He has compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. In other words, hey, I know that you're very charismatic and everybody loves to be with you and you're like a superstar, but you know what? As people have been out here for a long time, they're growing faint, they're growing tired, they need some food, they need some drink. Why don't you, if you'll send them, they'll go. But they may not even, they may wait too long out here and it's so late when they get back, they won't be able to buy anything, they won't be able to get anything. You ever been in a hurry and things didn't go well and you missed a meal and you're on the run and you swing into the fast food and get yourself something? You ever do that? Yeah. They didn't have fast food. There was no swinging in. There was preparation. And usually it had a lot of preparation, a lot more than we have. And he says, hey, they need some food. Jesus replied, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they answered. Bring them here to me, he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. Now, satisfied, satisfied. That's a beautiful word for they ate. Everybody had a little bit, but they had enough. They didn't gorge themselves. They didn't overeat. They were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. Basketfuls. So in other words, it's just the multiplication of the food. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men besides women and children. So a large crowd. So this harkens back to Elisha, when Elisha in the Old Testament, when the widow's oil is poured out, and the more oil is poured out, the more it comes out. The oil in the vessel just continues to pour. Jesus, because of his presence there and because of his blessing, the food just continues to be. The basket never runs out. There's always stuff in the basket. There's always food. There's always bread. There's always fish. There's always extra. Because Jesus provides. Because he is what? Compassionate. His compassion is what fuels your need and gives you what you need. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. Again, he goes to a solitary place. He takes time to pray. He goes and again, you say, well, that's Jesus. No, that's a lesson to all of us. Again, I mean, hammer that home in your life. As a Christian, we have a powerful tool, and it is prayer. prayer. And prayer helps us and others. So he goes up to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. Another supernatural moment. The supernatural moment of the bread, the supernatural moment now of walking on the lake, on the water. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they said, it's a ghost. They were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear, it's a ghost. Anybody ever seen a ghost? Anybody? Or you thought you did? I have one friend that said he saw a ghost one time. I don't know what he saw. Well, I know what he saw. Saw a demon. He may have thought it was a ghost, but it was a demon. See, here's the thing. Do you think the demonic forces know? When those guys get their little high-tech machines and they go walking into this old school or old hospital or what, do you think the demons know what they're doing, what they're up to? What are they looking for? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when Jesus talks to say, the demons know who Jesus is. They ask to be put in the pigs. They know the demon's been around a little bit longer than people. Maybe let me just share that. Demon's been around a little bit longer than people. And they know if you're looking for a ghost in some haunted hotel that you might be susceptible to what they might show you. And then if you're susceptible to that, maybe they can drag you away and pull you off into some supernatural Ouija board kind of tarot card reading stuff. Seriously. Now, you know, because here's the thing. It's not going to jump out of the closet on you and suddenly you, it's not like the movies. But there is a sense of permissions that in the Bible, that people give permissions and slide off into the world of stuff they don't need to be dealing with. The Bible's very clear on not getting involved with the supernatural stuff that's out there. The world, there's the natural and there's the supernatural. And we are only to understand what is natural. And we're to pray and to look to God for the rest. I mean, I know a woman told me one time that she lived with a ghost. And I thought, no, you don't, honey. You live with a demon. You just don't know it. Isn't that awful? No, I think it's awful. Now, that may scare some folks, but sorry, that's biblical. This is very biblical. They say it's a ghost, and they cry out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage. Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Another, do not be afraid. It's him. Don't be afraid. But he doesn't say there's no such thing. He doesn't say that there's something that you might be afraid of. He's saying, take courage. It's me. Don't be afraid. You know, see, when it's Jesus, you don't have to worry about being afraid. You can call on the name of Jesus at all times, in all places, in all circumstances. And he said, Lord, if it's you, they're still doubting. They're still, if it's you, what do you mean if it's me? What do you mean if it's you? If it's you, he says, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Now, I got to laugh. Peter's, like I said so many times, he's the bit of the dolt. He's the comic relief so often in the Bible. He's the one that says, I won't leave you, but I do. I call him the Barney Fife for us older folks. He is the guy that he's gonna try hard, but then he's gonna fail. And this is a great example. Why in the world would somebody say, hey, let me out of the boat and come and walk up? This is very, I've told this story before, and it's very Forrest Gumpian. It's like jump off the boat and swim to Lieutenant Dan, But the difference is, instead of swimming, Peter says, I'm going to walk on the water like you are. I'm going to do what you do because You're who you are. There's this moment of expecting miraculous things with Jesus. Peter, for all his foolishness, the moment is that he's willing to get out of the boat and do something supernatural, not for his own personal gratification, but because he sees Jesus and he says, Jesus, I've seen what you can do. Can you have me do that too? That's pretty amazing, his faith. And so, he gets out, and it says, then he got down out of the boat. So he eased himself over and walked on the water. That's a miracle right there. Peter walked on the water. Because when you're with Jesus, you can see yourself in the midst of a story that can have the miraculous. You are involved, and here's that moment, big picture, 10,000 feet up. We are part of the story of God. We're not just random. In your place and time, you have been placed by God for a purpose. You are not random. You are part of a big story. The people you see, the lives you influence, the deeds that you do, you can do amazing things because of your faith. Remember, he said just a chapter ago, faith like a mustard seed. Your faith has made you well. So it's not, see, here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's not just about your faith getting you the ticket to heaven. It's what your faith can do for others while you're here. You see what I'm saying? It really is the demonstration of the power of God in you. You say, well, I'm not going to walk on the water. Yeah, but what can you do? What things might you do in your life that you see that is basically miraculous? There's a lot of stuff that you can do. And here's the thing. It's like planting those seeds we talked about just a couple of chapters ago in Matthew. When you throw those seed out, you never know whose life you're going to change. When you meet people, when you talk to them about Jesus, which seed is it? See, you don't know. I don't know. I don't know what seed is going to fall on good soil and sprout and grow and change families and change lives of children and grandchildren. That to me is just, that's beautiful. He walks on the water toward Jesus. But, for his own gratification, but when he saw the wind, that is Peter, he gets out there and he's walking on the water and he realizes, oh my gosh, I'm walking on water. It reminds me, do you ever see somebody with stage fright? They rehearse, and I've actually seen this. We used to have children's, and we still do, have plays. We have kids here that do a great job and get up here and talk and don't have any issues. But we had one kid one time who got up there, and you see it sometimes in songs where the kids will practice really well, and then they get up here and they look out and they go, oh my gosh, look at all these people. And suddenly they don't know how to sing. And, and this one kid, stage fright, gets up there and just, froze and just, couldn't say his lines, and we all sort of giggled, and one of the other kids is trying to whisper his line, and he's just deer in the headlights. And that's what Peter's like, oh my gosh, do you see me? I'm walking on the water. It says, but when he saw the wind, he was what? Afraid. He was, and Jesus has just said, do not be afraid. If you won't be afraid, you'll be shocked what amazing things you will do with your life. The road here, and here's the one of the afraids. Let go and let God. Can you let go and let God in your life? Because here's the hardest thing. So often, we, like Herod, think, well, I've got to perform a certain way because I would be embarrassed if my family or my dad or my mom or somebody, I've got to perform. I've got to do certain things. I've got to live a certain way. I've got to make money. I've got to do this, got to do that. And sometimes we get in situations, not all the time, but sometimes, where you got to put what's most important first. And what's most important is your relationship with God. Your relationship, what is God doing in your life? And so often I see people that get, it's issues of money, it's issues of family, it's love issues, it's all kind of issues that come before God. And they end up putting things, so they get afraid to be embarrassed or to not be successful in the way that somehow they think they should be, and they'd rather have John the Baptist's head than Jesus walking on water with them. You see what I'm saying? It's just, they get afraid, the fear. But again, faith over fear. And he was afraid. He cried out. He began to sink, and he cried out, "Lord, save me." Now here's a beautiful word. Immediately. 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 Not waiting, not, look at you falling in the water. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" I love that. Immediately. In other words, if you will try to walk on the water with Jesus, immediately when you start to fall, he will catch you. You will not drown. You will not fall. You will not suffer when you're trying to follow Jesus. And here's the thing. Does it mean you're going to be successful? That may not be. But because you're with Jesus, because you know you're doing the right thing, you will be at what? Peace. You will have peace. You will have, and I say this so often, in our lives, when we walk down that road, often we get to a fork in the road, and we got to ask ourselves, Lord, which one should I take? And here's the thing. What I've learned is this. God doesn't sit there, Jesus, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Holy Trinity, doesn't sit there and go, if you pick the wrong one, you're messed up. Too bad, buddy. That's not the way God works. God says to you, choose and I will be with you no matter what. I will be with you to the end of the age. I will be with you in whatever decision you make. Make wise decisions, no doubt, because consequences come with all decisions. Did you know that? The world we live in doesn't always like that idea. But consequences come with every decision, no matter what you make, because sometimes we don't know which is right. But the thing is, pray about it. Remember, go off to a solitary place, pray about it, and make your decision based on your prayers. And know that if you make certain decisions, not only God, here's the thing, not only will you make the decision, God will go with you, but God, it will be a blessing because you are obedient in your prayer life. In your prayer life. And he said, Jesus says to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Make your decisions. Ask Jesus to be with you. Ask Jesus to guide you first. Go with you. And he will be with you. And when they climbed back into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." And see, that is our response to all the good that God does for us. You don't realize it so often. I don't realize how many days the storm is around us. And like I said when we first opened this morning, was it the best week ever? You woke up. You did something. Hopefully you were in good health. You ate a great meal or two this week, at least, right? Somewhere you ate. Somewhere you got enough nourishment and, And he says, "Truly you are the Son of God." Wow. When they had crossed over, they landed in Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought all their sick to him and begged him to let the sick just touch the edge of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. All it takes is a desire to touch him, to be there. And he will have compassion on you, and he will be there immediately. That's the purpose of chapter 14. Do not fear. Do not worry about being beheaded. Do not worry about losing your job. Do not worry about financial issues. Do not worry. All you can do is what you can do, and all you can do is pray sometimes, because at the end of the day, all you got is Jesus. That's it. All you've got is Jesus. So take courage. Do not be. Do not be. There you go. There you go. Do not be afraid. It says that over and over. Do not be afraid. Face life knowing Jesus is with you and holding you and compassionate towards you. Let's pray together.